Hello everyone, and welcome to another New Discovery teaching. First of all, I wanted to apologize. Sometimes I say New Discovery teaching when not everything is a new discovery. I'm just so used to most of the things I'm teaching being new discoveries that I say that every time, and I wanted to apologize right now. I'm not perfect, and I didn't do that on purpose. Anyway, today's New Discovery is about how to interpret Daniel 11. One of the things I found after 30 years of studying the Old Testament is that the Bible prophets spoke in what I call movie flashbacks. In other words, they would make a prediction and then they would repeat that prediction and give like a movie flashback and give additional details about that prediction. And that really is helpful to understand the Bible prophecy, because if we look at chapters and we say this happened after that thing and that happened after this thing and one after another, then we get all confused and lends up to endless weird interpretations of the Bible. But if we know that something is just a movie flashback about something that's been predicted over and over again, then we can know exactly what God's trying to help us find. Unfortunately, the prophet dudes did not say, hey everybody, this is a movie flashback. I'm revisiting the prophecy and prediction I said a chapter ago. No, unfortunately, the prophet dudes did not tell us that. But I found that that's in fact what they do, and that's how you understand the end of Daniel 11. Daniel 11 is all about the wars of the kings of the north and the south, and I'm going to give you a new spin on how to interpret that book, okay? So let's turn to Daniel 11, 29 through 45, which most people say, and I say, it's about the Antichrist. You see, this whole book is about kings of the north versus the kings of the south, and that'll be an important key in understanding something as we move onward. Anyway, verse 29, at the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter times. Which he's talking about there is, this is the king of the north, the he. He's all these times before this, verses 1 through 28, they're talking about the kings of the north versus the kings of the south and their battles and all the intricacies and small details of those battles. He's going to say this time when he comes against the king of the south, verse 30, the ships from Cyprus shall come against him, or the ships of Kittim, as the King James Version says. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in a rage against the holy covenant to do damage. And he shall return and show regard to those who forsake the holy covenant. Verse 31, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and they'll place there the abomination of desolation. So what this is about the king of the north. He's invading the king of the south. And as he does so, the ships of Kittim oppose him. Now, if you look that up, it could be interpreted a large navy from perhaps even the United States opposes him, which would make sense if an Iranian force was moving on our allies in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We might oppose them and tell them, be careful. But for whatever reason, he gets a little grieved. He gets a little upset, verse 30, and he returns in a rage against the Holy Covenant and does damage. So that's the consistent picture of the Bible, that this Antichrist leads a Shia force down through the Middle East, and then he comes back up, and in a surprise, he attacks Israel, which is why the Bible says the day of the Lord happens when people say peace and safety. It's why, like Ezekiel 38:11 about this same battle says, Israel will be a peaceful and unsuspecting nation. Now think about it. If it was just a force of Muslims marching towards Israel, I don't think Israel would be that unsuspecting or that peaceful. You see, the entire framework for the end of time is that in Daniel 9:27, that the Antichrist, he makes an agreement for 7 years. And then in the middle of that agreement, this Antichrist invades Israel and sets up this abomination that we just read about. Now, what is that, Alan? Well, the abomination is the act of the Antichrist coming into the temple and stopping the sacrifices and proclaiming himself the real Messiah. And we see that here. It says in verse 31, and forces, or his armed forces, shall be mustered by the Antichrist, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, and they'll take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. Now, Jesus spoke of this in Matthew 24:15 and 16. He goes, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Well, this is the prophet Daniel, and he's speaking about it. He's talking about this as part of a larger force, the larger invasion force led by the Antichrist. He's going to come against the king of the south, or Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and those lands. And then he's going to turn back and come in a rage against the Holy Covenant, which basically means he's going to come back, act like he's coming back home, and then he's going to come against Israel. And when he comes against Israel, that's where the sacrifices will be renewed. That's where they're going to rebuild a new temple, which some people say it can happen now. They've got all the implements. They have the red heifer, which is a cow that's been extinct for 2,000 years. Now they've got one. They've got the inks they need for their robes. They've got all the implements, all the sacrificial things to start up sacrificing again. So what does this mean? This means that Israel is planning to do exactly what the Bible predicts they will do at the end of time. Israel's planning to start sacrificing again. They're getting it ready. And some people thought it would have to be where the Dome of the Rock is, but now we know that it can be in the city of David, recent archaeological discoveries say. So some people say they have the temple already rebuilt in a modular design. So when will this be put in place? Well, some people say that 7-year peace treaty of Daniel 9:27 will actually allow this whole thing to start over, to start the sacrificing again, to which it says in verse 31 that the armed forces of the Antichrist will stop the sacrifices when the Antichrist marches into that temple. So it says here in Daniel 11, it says, verse 36, the king shall do according to his own will. He will exalt himself above every god, and speak blasphemy against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished. So this is definitely time-stamping this at the end of time. The picture is that the Antichrist will lead a Muslim force and be their Mahdi, or Muslim Messiah. And then he's going to come into that temple, and all of a sudden he's going to change. He's going to say, I'm the real God of everything. I am the God of the universe. Worship me. And so will everybody do it? Apparently so. If he's casting down lightning, raising the dead, doing all sorts of false miracles, the world might just accept him as the God of gods. We see that verse 38, verse 37, he's going to regard neither the God of his fathers nor the desire of women. Could be a gay guy, nor regard any god, but he shall exalt himself above them all. So that's the picture, that whatever gods his relatives worshipped, of perhaps, Islamic gods of Allah or whatever, he's going to exalt himself as the supreme God. Now maybe he will claim to be, an alien, and I'm from a different universe and a different galaxy, and thus, I know everything you need to know about worshiping and about God, about what the truth is. Here's my spacecraft, here's my technology, so leave behind your antiquated gods and follow the real God of sophistication, the Muslim Mahdi. I'm all three in one: Christ, Muslim, Islam, and whatever other religion you want to have. So getting back to the redescription, or the movie flashback prophecy, that starts kind of in 40, verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. This has been one of the most misunderstood verses in the history of the church. I was taught, like most of you most likely, that this is a pincher movement, that the king of the north and the king of the south have the Antichrist in a pincher. But, if you really read this, the whole chapter is about the king of the north versus the king of the south. And so all of a sudden introducing the Antichrist in another army somewhere in the middle of a verse, does that make sense? No. Verse 40, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, the king of the north. And the king of the north shall come out against him, the him being the king of the south, like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He shall enter all countries, and overwhelm them, and pass through. And this fits in with what we know will happen, that a northern Shia Muslim force will sweep through the Middle East and attack the Sunni nations of Egypt and other nations like North Africa. And then he's going to come back up and attack the glorious land, or Israel, which it says in 41, verse 41, he shall enter the glorious land. and many countries shall be overthrown. So that's what we've seen in other chapters. Ezekiel 21, we see how a northern Antichrist will sweep down, and then he'll ascend to Egypt. Then he'll ascend back up and stop at the fork of the road and decide to invade Israel. We see that in Ezekiel 38, which has the same language as Ezekiel 21, the day of the Lord, and it is here. Ezekiel 38, a northern Antichrist invades the southern states. Then he ascends back up to invade Israel. And we just saw that in what we just read, that he comes down against this king of the south, and then he comes back up and invades Israel and sets up the abomination. And we see that movie flashed back here. Verse 41 is the movie flashback after he comes through the king of the north starts to tangle with the king of the south again. Verse 40, he overwhelms through many countries. And then verse 41, he enters into the glorious land, which is Israel. And these other countries are named Edom, Moab, and prominent people of Ammon, which is like Jordan. Some of these countries shall escape from his hand. People of Jordan, Ammon, which is why people think the people of Israel will flee to Jordan, which could be. I think they'll flee to America, but that's another story for another day. And then it says, verse 42, he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. That's verse 43. But verse 44, but the news from the east and north shall trouble him. Therefore shall go out with great flurry and destroy and annihilate many. And then he'll place the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end. That is exactly what the entire Bible speaks of. Isaiah 14:25, on my mountains I will crush the Assyrian in my land. Joel 2:20, I will drive out the northern army from my land. And many, many places speak, like Ezekiel 39, on the mountains of Israel, Gog will be crushed. So the same Bible has the same words and phrases to describe the same predictions about the same time frame. So here we saw how Daniel 11 talks about the kings of the north versus the kings of the south. Verse 29 talks about there's an attack. The king of the north comes against the king of the south, but the ships of Kittim comes against him, and he turns back. He acts like he's going back home, and then in a rage he comes against Israel and sets up the abomination. And that's one version. And then we see here at verse 40 starting at another version of the same events, how these two kings attack each other, and then the king of the north goes through the glorious land, or Israel, verse 41. And then he'll take over Egypt and North Africa, and he's trying to establish a caliphate. But then again, like we saw earlier, news of the ships of Kittim coming against him troubles him, and so he acts like he's coming back home. And then he moves in and attacks Israel. Verse 44, but news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And then he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain of Israel. So you can see this is like the original movie scene in verse 29, and then here verses 40 through the end, verse 45, is a movie flashback about those same events. And we can glean from all this that the Antichrist, there'll be wars between the north and the south. We've kind of seen that already, with Iraq and ISIS and all those types of wars. But, this will be a final war. The king of the south and the north, they fight, and then the king of the north will come into Israel, set up the abomination, and he'll come against the glorious land. It says that, that's what he's going to do. And he sets up this abomination, and that causes Israel to flee, that Jesus said. Jesus said, when you see the abomination spoken of by Daniel, flee to the mountains. And that's another thing we know that's supposed to be here, but it's not, because not every prophecy has every single thing, okay? So this is how you interpret Daniel 11. It's all about the kings of the north and the south. There's no Antichrist caught in a pincher movement. It's about the north and the south. They fight each other, and then the king of the north acts like he's coming back home, as like Ezekiel 21. The king of the north, the Nebuchadnezzar, comes down and fights the king of the south. Then he acts like he's coming back home. He stops at a fork of the road. He looks at the feathers. He throws the dice, calls his bookies, and then he decides to invade Israel. It says that in Jeremiah 49 and 50. The king of the Babylon, an acronym for the Antichrist, invades the king of the south. Then he invades Babylon. And then he invades Israel. So it's the same story throughout the entire Bible. Ezekiel 38 and 39, the king of the north sweeps down. Then he ascends back up and invades Israel, a peaceful and unsuspecting Israel. Ezekiel 38:11. And then this is the same story here, Daniel 11. The king of the north sweeps through the Middle East. He invades the king of the south, then he goes back up and, in a surprise, invades Israel. And we also see the same picture in a new discovery that I feel I've made, which is Isaiah 15 through 22. Israel, all these nations are invaded by the king of the north. The Assyrian, the Medes, it says. They invade Babylon, Isaiah 13. Iran, basically, and they invade Arabia, Isaiah 21. And then they burn Arabia, which is the whore of Babylon, I believe. And then they come back up and invade Israel in Isaiah 22. And then Isaiah 25, Jesus Christ comes back. Isaiah 26, the resurrection happens. Isaiah 27, the rapture with the trumpet. And then Isaiah 28 starts the loop of information all over again. Or the movie flashback. Israel, you made a covenant with death, so on the day of the Lord, Isaiah 28, you're going to be attacked and destroyed. So we see this over and over in Isaiah. Isaiah 1, Israel, God says, I reject your sacrifices in the rebuilt temple. So God's going to send an army of strangers to attack and burn Jerusalem, which the experts and commentaries, God bless them, say Isaiah 1 happened long ago. But Isaiah 1 says after this invasion, after that, Jerusalem will be a righteous city. Well, that's the millennium. And then sure enough, Isaiah 2 is the millennium. Then we see that same loop of information repeated all throughout the Old Testament, which is why I called the Bible a movie flashback. And my book is called The Bible is a Movie Flashback. If you have any questions, email me at abrook8, no S, the number 8. I'll be glad to answer any end-time question. This is Alan Brooks signing off for another new discovery teaching how to interpret Daniel 11.